As I mentioned earlier, this week I ventured outside of the studio to visit the Qafë Barit former prison camp located in the north of Albania. This came from an invitation from local academics and historians as part of a project supported by the OSCE mission in Albania. We took a 6-hour drive into Pulka County to visit the prison. This is what happened. Welcome to Inside Albania. Now, I think to really go inside Albania, you have to understand what's happened in Albania's past, and that includes the almost 50 years of totalitarian communist rule. Now, throughout these years, Enver Hoxha, the dictator, built prisons and forced labour camps throughout the country where he sent all of the people that he thought were against him or that posed any kind of threat to him. During his reign of terror, thousands and thousands of people were put in these prisons and camps and sent into far-flung parts of the country to spend years and years toiling away in mines or paying for the supposed crimes that they had committed against him. Out of those thousands also died. They died from torture, from beatings, from starvation, from illness and sickness, and from the hard work that they were forced to do. Today, I'm at Qafë Barit. Now, we are somewhere in the middle of Pulka County, about 6 hours drive north of Tirana. Google Maps told us 3.5. But once you get off the main highway, it's a 2-hour drive through really rocky terrain, winding around the side of cliffs. Actually, my sports watch has told me I've done 20 kilometres today because the road is so bumpy. There's no phone signal. And we think that's remote by today's standards. But imagine 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when the camp was open and people who wanted to visit their loved ones here would have to walk on foot the 17 kilometres through the mountains in snow, wind and rain. But the reason I'm here today is because it is the anniversary of the revolt of Qafë Barit, where prisoners stood up against the regime and demanded better. There's a ceremony that's taking place. There are ex-prisoners and their family members here, and we're going to be speaking to them to find out people, less than its neighbour and more well-known prison of Spach. Now, these people would be kept here in these rooms behind us. Here was where they would eat, where the kitchens were. Behind it, which is falling down, was the hospital area. And they were working in mines extracting copper and pyrite, and you can see those sort of in the distance behind us, although there are others dotted around the area. Now, this was back-breaking work. People were cutting out chunks of rock, moving them by hand. They had quotas to fill. If they didn't fill the quota, they could expect punishments. It was freezing cold. Even today in Tirana this morning, it was 23 degrees, but here it's cold. So imagine in the winter what the conditions were like here. There was no access to proper medicine or anything like that. One of the gentlemen who was speaking earlier, who we'll talk to in a minute, he was saying, you know, this wasn't just a labour camp, this was a graveyard where people died. They died from beatings, they died from illness, they died from exhaustion. Thank you for the interview. First, can you your name and
My name is Ethem Fezulari. Call me Tom.
I will, Tom.
Tom.
First, can you explain a bit about the revolt that happened here? What happened and why did it happen?
About this camp?
Yes.
This camp. Well, I think this camp is a micro madhouse for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't been in jail here, but my brother served so long here. And as far as I know from my brother's saying, there are a lot of graves around this area because anyone die, kill, or get hanged, no give to the family. Just put somewhere in the grave. We have tried, as a chairman of the persecuted people, to find the graves of these people, but unfortunately, we don't have much witness. And this, I think, is the government's fault, because if that happened 34 years ago, when Albania changed the rules, we could find everybody. But no one was interested in that, because the regime changed the name.
There was a revolt. The prisoners stood up against the regime. Why did they do this?
Look, when the people is happy to die and live in that conditions, I think they just give up the life, because the life was worse than living. Then they try to liberate themselves and the companions. But unfortunately, the police brutality, rearrest them, torture them, and on the end kill them.
Your brother, he was here for how many years?
He spent here only 7 months. And the rest I spent in Spać.
And what was his crime? What did he do to deserve that punishment?
He died when he got 60 years. He passed away because he suffered so much. He fell in jail when he was only 18 years old.
Why? For what reason?
Because the government, the police on the time accused him, tried to escape from Albania. That's all.
And that was enough to put him in prison for life?
They gave 13 years in prison. He served 13 years in prison.
And what happened to him afterwards? He was free afterwards? Pas just the adviet the leer?
It's a big story, unfortunately. We lived in Australia for 49 years. When he left the prison, 1974, we tried to escape. On the end, we built a boat in our cities, a lake between Yugoslavia and Albania. Then the boat was not from timber, no, with a motor. It was just a piece of line. Line, we just covered up that, and for 8 years we crossed the lake from one side to the other. 16 people.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's why we live in Australia.
And then you escaped and you ended up in Australia.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Including my brother, who served 30 years in prison.
Good, I'm happy for you. But you came back to Albania?
Well, I think it's unfortunate. I tried to help my country to invest here, but unfortunately, I feel ashamed to say I lost the love of my country, because still on the pair is communists.
So we're here today because it's the anniversary of the revolt that happened here. Can you quickly explain sort of what led to the revolt? Because from what I know of communist history, to do anything against the regime was sort of certain death. So what led people to think they had no other choice but to revolt?
Yeah, exactly. This revolt of this labor camp and prison, mostly for political prisoners, but also for some other ordinary prisoners, came 11 years later, the revolt of the camp of Spać. And in commemoration of that revolt, the revolt from Spać prison in 1973 had a deep meaning, saying that, you know, we're already dead. We will live by dying as heroes. the requests of that revolt were Albania, like Europe, like the rest of Europe, we want democracy, we want, like it was, they were deeply not for conditions.
Yeah.
It was completely political in that sense, asking for freedom. They know perfectly that it wouldn't last. They knew perfectly that most of them would die, but it was like living by dying as heroes.
They had no other, they were going to die anyway.
They felt like that. And then 11 years later, conditions in this prison, which was opened in 1982.
At the end, when things were
Can you
supposed to be
imagine?
getting-
Yeah. So some prisoners were previously in Spac, and then like Mr. Bedri Bloshman, for example, and then came to this camp, which is even, it's now difficult to reach. Can you imagine how it used to be, you know? And conditions the same, of course. So they just wanted to revive that memory of living and resisting.
How bad was it here? What do we know from people who've survived here? Like, what were the conditions like? Were they tortured as well? How bad?
Absolutely, torture was part of their daily life. Like proper torture, we as the Institute of Study of Communist Crimes and Consequences, we are making a compilation of memories plus documents about torture. So, and I'm just writing on that now in these days. And like torture and mistreatment, it's difficult to say when one, where one starts and ends and starts the other.
We're talking, I mean, in specifics, people were beaten, isolation. What other specific examples of torture were there here?
So by beating, mean horrible kind of beating was like daily. That was daily routine, you know. For example, bad feeding, like they had to work 12 hours in the mine, but by having very bad food, you know, like people would even starve or die by starvation, you know. So that's kind of mistreatment, torture in the between, you can't say the gray area, you know. But also other tortures were like specifically tortures, isolating people for months in the water. For example, you have the cell with cold water all the time, and by having your leg there all the time. Other kind of torture, again with water, for example, was that you make the drop of water in your
Forehead.
yeah, you know, but like for hours, and you would just go crazy, or by electroshock, but not with electric, but by the phone. You put them and it makes the in your ears for 3 minutes. You would go crazy. Like such things, they were mostly daily.
Yes. And the people that were in charge of this camp, the people who worked here, who were guards, who were officers, have any of them faced any consequences?
Absolutely not, with exception of Edward Zaya, was the one in the prison, one of the worst torturers ever. Edmund Zaya, when he migrated to Germany, and then some former political prisoners opened a request to German state to persecute, to you know, judge him, extradite and make a case out of such person. And it's not the case, it's not over yet. I think they are somewhere, and probably will be the first and the last from these officers and torturers of the regime. Otherwise, the other people just, you know, have a normal life.
Taking a state pension.
Taking state pension, and also going to the media and telling how it was, you know, to be a torturer or whatever, you know, like Cemal Lame or other members